Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, today we're going to be discussing a topic that is one of the two most hot topics that have been debated, I think, in the last 8 months. One, of course, was COVID, but today we're going to be discussing China. China's really, the incursion on our borders. We've seen, and now, of course, we've been told that there's been a disengagement. So some people are saying it's a disengagement, but it's not really a withdrawal. Do we take the Chinese at their word? Are we going to see a repeat of 1962? Where does Indo-China relationship stand? That is something I'm going to be discussing on the panel today. Joining me is Jaydev Ranade. He's a former additional secretary at the RNAW, and he's also the president of the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. I have Mr. Kaval Sibal, former ambassador and former foreign secretary. Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, he's a director at the Center for Joint Warfare Studies. Mr. Ranade, you are an intelligence man, really. So do we take the Chinese at their word when they say that they're withdrawing or disengaging? Or, is this another ploy like as what happened in 1962?
Well, we certainly cannot and should not take them at their word. This is a very limited disengagement at a place which had probably one of the highest tension points in the entire, along the entire LAC. And they have to get back to where they were in April 2020. So there's still a way before we can say it's a withdrawal. But I don't think we can take them at their word. And I can give you two reasons for that. Firstly, why did they mass their troops and come in strength in May? And then, of course, they were caught by surprise when we reacted so rapidly. But why did they come? And secondly, they would have had an objective. In fact, they certainly had an objective. They had an aim which has not been achieved. So why are they withdrawing? What is Xi Jinping and the leadership going to show to their own people as a substantial gain from this exercise? So there are a number of questions here, which makes me feel that this is not the end of it. The Chinese are going to do something else. And as I said, they have already broken all the agreements and treaties. They have already shown that they're untrustworthy. And a final point, their premier think tank, the Chinese Institutes of Contemporary International Relations, which is directly under the Ministry of State Security, their external intelligence arm, the head of the South Asia group there, he had said that since the liberation of China and the independence of India, showdown was inevitable, and there is a cap on the extent to which they could have a good relationship.
Your take on this. Are you going to be diplomatic, or are you going to really tell us as it is? Do we take China at its word?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you, sir. Yes.
Well, obviously we can't. We have a long experience of China. And not only us, other countries have had similar experience with China. You will recall that Xi Jinping had promised Obama that he will not militarize the South China Sea islands. But he has done that. And that he did despite the fact that the United States is the world's biggest military power. It is present in the South China Sea in a big way. It has got alliances, military bases, forces on the ground, and yet he took that decision. So therefore, one can't take him at his word at all. That is one. The other is that our own experience. We signed 1993 agreement, 1996 agreement, 2005 agreement, 2013 agreement. And each agreement was intended to make sure that there was not any inadvertent clash between the two sides. And therefore, more and more protocols, more and more strategies were devised, patrolling and others, to avoid any physical clash. And if they came face to face, then certain protocols would be followed. Now, all that was rubbished by China in April, May last year by moving in 50,000 troops, totally contrary to the agreement. So there is no sanctity left in the agreements, which means any future agreement we have with them can be violated and there'll be no sanctity. Now, they have again said very categorically they are not going to clarify the line of actual control. Their position is that both sides know where it is, and that clarifying it will actually raise even more issues which they don't want to go into. But from our point of view, if you want to have a stable border situation is very important, as was agreed by China in 1996 to clarify the line of actual control on the ground, and they reneged on that agreement. But we have to come back to this. But then I don't see how the Chinese will do this, because they have officially said that they want to do it. Their ambassador in India has also said that. So it is an open-ended game, and we have to formulate our future policies on the assumption that China will not honor the agreements, and therefore we have to be prepared for surprises and make sure that we are not surprised as we were this time, and are capable of a rapid response to checkmate China.
Bhatia, we have two skeptics on the panel. I'll be very interested to know your take on this. And people, what people are saying, China may have disengaged, but they have not really withdrawn. So what is the difference really in this statement between the two?
Two things. One is the trust, which I agree with my co-panelists. You really can't trust any adversary, China least of all. But you got to trust yourself. You got to trust your own capabilities, which you need to build. You need to enhance capacities. And we need peace and clarity along the LAC, and we need an art, and that's what we got right now. That's the beginning of the disengagement. It is not a withdrawal. It's a disengagement from friction points. And I think it's a very positive step where the two PLA and then an army, through diplomatic, political and military dialogue, have decided to disengage, because the friction points had it's a flashpoint. It could have spiraled into a skirmish. It had all the potential of starting a conflict. You have, these are high altitude areas, and these are 5,000 meters areas where the temperatures are low and temperatures are high. One man, letting go of a shot, even post Galwan, if you see, nothing has happened. And yesterday, the Army Commander, Northern Command, General Joshi, he made a very good statement. He said it needed courage not to press the trigger. So that we have to understand the mind of the soldiers and the commanders out there, and the conditions they have operated face to face. So I think it's an excellent step that we have disengaged. We are definitely not withdrawn. Disengagement, de-escalation, de-induction, these are three stages. And it's only on the either bank of Pangong, so North and South Bank, where we have disengaged, or in the process of disengaging. It's a simultaneous synchronous disengagement, which will be verified, and there's no trust in this, that everything will be verified. That's going to take time. And thereafter, other sectors will be taken on, as stated by the Raksha Mantri in the parliament. So we are in for a long, tedious process of disengagement, but I think it's a very good step forward. And it suits, I think, at the strategic level, at the geopolitical level, it is in China's favor, it's in India's favor. China cannot afford a war with India, and India doesn't want a war with China at all. We also should be very clear about it. War is war, and this peace which we have disengaged is going to come at a cost, and we should be prepared to the cost and build capability and make sure China does not surprise us second time.
Fair enough. Mr. Rana, you want to come in on this? And also, in terms of, we should not take China at its word, but in terms of, how much of a role did the change in the US have? Did that have an impact on what happened? Why did they withdraw suddenly?
Let me take your last point first. I don't think that the US, change of administration there is such a big factor in the India-China equation. I think there are 2 points here that I'd like to make, or sub-points. Firstly, it was China's decision, and I think it has been brewing for a while, at least since 2017. They've been planning to, quote-unquote, teach us a lesson. And there were enough indicators filtering out of Beijing on this, particularly after the standoff at Doklam. So that is one thing. It is a standalone. Second is, I think there was a lot of confidence there is, in fact, a lot of confidence in the PLA and probably within the Chinese leadership, that all the reorganization, the restructuring, the streamlining that they have done, and now it's almost like a Xi Jinping army, frankly, all the top commanders are his boys, and that they are now capable with the new training modules, etc., that they've done, they're capable of taking us on. I think what they didn't realize, and where they miscalculated, is that our troops are battle-hardened. They're used to high-altitude warfare. They've been deployed there for a long time, which the Chinese weren't and aren't. So I think there is a big gap there which they didn't factor in. Secondly, I think the standoff itself, dragging on for 9 months, was a test of wills, and it is a test of stamina, apart from the political will, which in our case stood firm. But it was a test of wills. And I think on the Chinese side, probably there was some wavering. because the troops there normally are deployed there for about a year or two before they're rotated. The troops do not belong to that area. And I think Xi Jinping has reached such a stage today in China. He's so powerful that he's able to suppress the discontent that is there, that is definitively there against him, the opposition to him, but he's been able to suppress it. The question now arises, were there voices or were there people around him who could tell him that what he has done is a miscalculation, or India is not going to back off that easily? Perhaps that didn't happen. So there are a number of factors here that come into play. But let me just add to what we were discussing earlier and say that forget withdrawal or forget disengagement. I think we are going to see a period of sustained pressure on India. And when I say pressure, I don't necessarily mean the threat of war, but the fact that our army will have to recalculate and recalibrate its deployment, and we will have to expend more money on the armed forces. So there is going to be pressure. And I think this is a good time for our military leadership to also start thinking of, as General Bhatia said, we should not be caught unprepared next time. But I think the next time we should be thinking in terms of outfoxing, outsmarting the Chinese.
I hope the next time is later rather than sooner. But Mr. Sehgal, just to continue from what everybody's been saying, this withdrawal or disengagement, whatever you want to call it, is just we've just seen the first phase. The area where we are interested in, there has been no movement so far. Do you think the Chinese will also withdraw from Depsang area also?
Look, let me first say that on the very positive side, this is really a very major setback to China. China has such notions of sovereignty where the member of their committee, central committee or whatever, who was earlier their foreign minister, said in connection with the decision they got against them by the tribunal or under the law of the sea, that China will not yield an inch of territory bequeathed to it by its ancestors. This is their fundamental hard line in terms of not retreating from any land that they claim. Now, they claim all these areas from which they have retreated. This is the first time that China has retreated from areas which it claims are under its sovereignty, right? Number two, I think our army, we've done a very good job by showing all this on videos so that the world can see the Chinese forces retreating. It's a huge moral slap on the face of the PLA. The Chinese themselves would have never shown this. But this is now known to the rest of the world, where their tanks are going back, their soldiers are going back, their sanghas are being destroyed, their tents are being uprooted, so whatever. So that is one. The second thing is that we have compromised ourselves, and maybe from a certain point of view, rightly so, because of the fact that the two forces were very close to each other. The tanks were fully loaded, the rockets were fully prepared for launching, and it was a trigger-happy situation. So therefore, a conflict has been avoided. The Chinese were telling us all this while, you first withdraw from the south bank of the lake, and then we will withdraw from the northern side of the lake. So we've had a compromise where both sides are withdrawing, and we are withdrawing from the Kailash Range heights, which is a major concession by us in the interest of avoiding the chance of a real military conflict. Now, we have said that within 48 hours of verified withdrawals, we will then talk about the other hot friction points, whether it is Hot Springs or Gogra or Demchok or Depsang. Now, my point is that having withdrawn from an area which the Chinese considered very sensitive and were under pressure to have us removed from that area, and in return made a concession on the northern bank. Once that lever in our hand is gone, what is it that they will really pressure them to engage in any honest discussions within a reasonable time frame to de-escalate in other areas. Because if they did that, this would mean that there's a fundamental change in thinking with regard to the border and relationship with India. Now, this presents us two other problems, which is that we are going to go ahead with improving the infrastructure on our border. And this has been one of the reasons they say why they came in, because this enhances the capability to avoid the pressures that they've been putting on us in the past, because they are better placed than us in terms of infrastructure capabilities and the capacity to mobilize quickly. The second is Quad and Indo-Pacific. Now, the Quad foreign ministers are meeting, and I think there'll be a virtual meeting of the heads of the Quad, or leaders of the Quad countries. And this is an issue, again, which is being said was one of the reasons why China is putting pressure on India. So these kind of challenges, political and strategic challenges, will continue to mount on China, and that they have to take a larger policy decision as to how they're going to handle it. And if, as a result of what they see, is India increasing the stakes for China, especially maritime stakes, what is it that they have in their hand to counterbalance that? And the only thing they have in hand is the border in the north. So they're not going to give that lever up. And Depsang, therefore, to my mind, is going to be a difficult issue to be resolved in any reasonable time frame. But we have to persevere. And the Chinese now know that they won't be able to pressure us as they've done in the past. And therefore, they have to look for some room to reach some compromise so that they can have some kind of stability and not leave the situation open-ended, where it appears that they have actually received a major setback and have nothing to show in terms of any gain that they have gained from adventurism that they have engaged in. Now, what they'll say is that in Depsang we'll stay firm. I'm just speculating, and therefore we are going to be able to generate pressure on this very, very vital road that links Xinjiang, links Siachen to Leh. So therefore, I think they may want to keep this lever in their hand, but we will see how it goes.
How are we going to persuade them to go in for the phase 2 and phase 3 of the withdrawal, where China has advantage over us?
No, there's little doubt that the Kailash Ridge was officially very important heights, and they did put pressure on China. It's only after the 30th of August was the Indian Army occupied those heights that at the negotiating table we were talking in equal terms. Otherwise, we were not talking equal terms. And that definitely has played a major role in the disengagement process, where China has agreed to a status quo ante, which was India's position as always. Now, having said that, but we have to understand that these are very vast areas. There are many QPQ options, as we call it. And every QPQ option has a limited, it can't be infinity. It is only limited time and space. So to that, I will say that Kailash Ridge has achieved its end in ensuring that we have got a status quo ante, and when it is going to be applied to other areas, I'm sure it will be done. And as far as Depsang is concerned, I agree it is sensitive to India, but it's also we have to understand that they have made our patrolling difficult. No one can stop patrolling of infantry. Infantry is, I'm an infantryman, I can go anywhere. There's no obstacle for the infantry ever. I will go, they have occupied a certain position from where our patrolling of the areas of Depsang are certain patrolling points onto the east of that bottleneck, which is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on, becomes time consuming. But the fact is that they can't stop us from patrolling. We have other avenues available. And in April of 2013, they had done a similar thing. And then they had vacated after 21 days. I was the DGMO at that point of time. So we have other options available. It's not that there was a single option of Kailash Ridge and no more. These are very vast areas. They're enough important heights, and what we need to do is we have to get our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities right. We have to focus and finance infrastructure development, which we've been lagging behind. There's a terrain friction on our side, and there's an infrastructure differential, which is very vast. Let's face facts. We have given it focus, but still the terrain the infrastructure differential between on the other side and this side is very vast, and we'll have to cover those gaps. And for that, we need finances, we need focus, and we need to build capabilities. We need to have quick reaction forces to preempt Chinese occupation. And in case we fail to preempt, then we should be reactive and make sure that they don't proceed beyond a certain point, like we've done in the 9 months. It's a game of patience, and I'm hopeful that they will be singing other areas. And but we should be prepared for this to expand to other areas. We should not just focus on Eastern Bloc. It's a 3-4-8 kilometer that of actual control. They have done it in Nakola. I point the core out there. They can do it in other areas which are equally vulnerable, equally sensitive. So we have to be on our guard throughout in all the areas, right from Karakoram Pass on the west to Kibutu in the east.
What are the options before us to put more pressure on China? And have we given away our biggest advantage?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you, sir. Yes.
Well, I would say that not only do we have to be patient and engage in this game of chess, but we have to counter their moves. I don't think that, or let me put it like this, that I don't know about our having given away the biggest advantage, because the talks on our side were being led by the military. We had a lieutenant general who was there very much front and center of the talks. He was subsequently joined by a representative from the Foreign Service. So it was a joint discussion. And I'm sure the military commander would have ensured that we are not put at a disadvantage when this happens. So I at least take that position until something to the contrary comes forth. Secondly, the army itself has stood firm on those heights, in those areas. They're very tough terrain. I've been posted there for 2.5 years, and I know exactly what it is. Very tough terrain. And they have stood firm for 9 months. I don't think either the army will allow him to fritter away the gains that they made, or that he himself would fritter away the gains that they made. So about losing an advantage, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know the tactical situation on the ground, but that's how I approach it. The second question that you asked about how they would react, or how we would move ahead, I would point to, of course, certainly they have already expanded the scope of tension right across the 4,057 kilometer LAC, but they have added a new dimension to it by erecting what they call the Xiaokhang Border Defense Village, the model well-off border defense village, and erecting one near Longchu, in the Kibutu area. Now, I don't know, they've got plans for 684 of them. There are 73 already in Tibet, which are coming up. But if this starts happening, we are going to see a sort of frontier posts coming up, manned by civilians, but well-equipped and well-settled civilians, which will add its own problems, because they will certainly try and position these in areas where which are under dispute, or which are close to areas of dispute, so that it could nibble away the territory. And on our side, our border populations are thinning, because the people are going out in search of work into towns, etc. So that's another issue that has come up. But I think overall, as I said, I do expect a period of sustained pressure, need not be military kind of pressure, direct military pressure, but there will be sustained pressure on various fronts, multiple fronts, and I don't see China backing off. It's not just the military threat, there are multiple others also.
Any last thoughts on this, Ambassador Sybil?
On
the road ahead for India-China, in terms of, how do we get them to get some peace on the border?
I think the road ahead is going to be very, very difficult, because China is building itself steadily to confront the United States. And their self-confidence is amazing, if you talk to people, Chinese people who seem to represent the thinking of the Chinese Communist Party, and for that matter, if you analyze, as Jaydev does, the statements that come from the Chinese leadership, they are convinced that the United States is on the decline, and time is on the side of China. And they already are the largest economy in the world. They are soon going to have the largest navy in the world. So they are going to go in for more and more power projection. And the more they confront the United States, the more they'll be able to feel that they can generate pressure on India without cost. So they're not going to give that up. And the only rival to them in Asia, the only rival is India. The other countries are small countries, even if they're big economic powers like Japan and Korea. Both are dependent for their defense on the United States, and they can't move an inch in terms of confronting China unless they're absolutely sure of US backing and getting the green light from the United States, because the United States wouldn't want to get involved against its will in a conflict with China. India is the only country which can take an independent decision to confront China. And as we build our capacity, economic and military, our sinews how should I say, compete with China in Asia will become stronger. And therefore, China will have every incentive to push back India, to delay India's rise, to create problems for India in its neighborhood, which they are doing, so that they are able to confront what they think is their biggest challenge, the United States, without being diverted by pressure from another Asian power. So I'm afraid I don't see any hope of India and China going back to that kind of a vision that as two big Asian powers, if we cooperate with each other, the century is ours. The Asian century is ours. China wants the Asian century to be China's century, not an India-China century. And therefore, we have to fashion our strategic policies accordingly.
General Bhatia, last word to you.
No, China does respect strength, as we have witnessed as seen in the decennium process. The last 9 months we were at facing each other. So we have to build relative strength. It's 5 times the population national power of ours, but we have to synergize all our essential element of national power, which is diplomatic, informational, military, economic, political, cultural, and we'll have to make sure that we position ourselves in a very responsible manner to the world, because we need to bind to balance with other nations who have conquest and convergence of interests. At the military level, we'll have to bear the cost, we'll have to spend the monies required, we'll have to give the financial support, we have to evolve new structure and systems, infrastructure development, not only for the security purposes, but also integrate and develop our border areas, our border people, because a lot of the credit should also go to the people of Ladakh for what has happened out there. Without their support, the army wouldn't have survived and sustained the way to survive and sustaining out there. So we have to understand what Mr. Ranade was bringing out. We'll have to support that, and we'll have to encourage them. We'll have to provide them the wherewithal. So it's a long way ahead. There are a number of things to be done. We'll have to focus our energy. We'll have to spend our resources. And China is not going to go away. And it is not that the singer started and everything is tickety-boo and we're back to normal. No, it is just the beginning. It's not the end at all. There's a very long road ahead, which we'll have to traverse. We'll have to traverse with all our resources, with all our focus, and we'll have to make sure that we take the other nations along with us. How we do that is the challenge ahead. And I do feel that we have the capabilities, we have the capacities, we have demonstrated ones, and we should exploit our strengths in the armed forces also, which is not only along the LAC, but also in the other services, that is the Air Force and the Indian Ocean region. Money is the cost I have to vote for peace. Peace comes through preparedness and through costs.
Okay. Totally out of time, Mr. Ranade. A quick word to you.
Well, I just wanted to say that nothing is permanent. I think the Chinese leadership needs to remember that, and so do we. There's a cycle of history. Every 60 years, China faces a problem. So let's not assume that China is already at the top. I think we have to prepare for a sustained period, and I think our turn will come.
Our turn will come. And we must also remember that this is not 1962 also. So the road ahead is difficult. But as Mr. Ranade and all of us in the panel have said, that it is something that we can challenge and we can handle. But thank you so much for joining me on this discussion.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.